Visibility is key. I always think that, or I am conscious that now, because of things like social media and like different laws being abolished or changed and things like that, there's a lot more visibility among queer people. And I think that being visible is a political statement. And when you go to events like Pride and it is glittery and flamboyant and it can make lots of other people feel uncomfortable. And that, in my sense, is also really political. When you're thinking about queer people of colour, they are then marginalised even further, to the point where now there is a Pride on a separate day and it is growing tremendously. Not everybody can come out, and not everybody, it may not be beneficial for everybody to just come out as soon as they realise that their sexuality is not just like straight, that they should come out, because it may not be a safe thing too. So I think that's always one thing that we're in a pandemic. If anything, safety is the most important thing at the moment. So it's not a case of you should be out and proud or you should be visible. There aren't any shoulds. We shouldn't be, we shouldn't be. Let's not should on each other. My name is Lewis. My pronouns are he, him. Lewis is totally fine. I work for several organisations. I work for the NHS. I work for Black Beetle Health, and I also work for the LGBT Foundation. So the LGBT Foundation and Black Beetle Health are both based in Manchester, and my roles focus a lot more on queer people of colour and the sort of health around that. And for the NHS, I am a psychological wellbeing practitioner in London. So I also help all sorts of people with common mental health challenges such as anxiety, low mood, and depression. From a safety point of view over the last 6 months, I feel like myself, and I don't want to talk on behalf of everybody else, but there is a certain level of safety or a sense of safety that's been compromised to a certain extent, and it can just be things such as other people not wearing a mask. And I'm a key worker for the NHS as well, so obviously safety is a huge thing. It's something that we think about a lot, especially with the patients or my clients as well, because if I'm treating somebody with anxiety or depression, for example, then I don't want to be adding to any of their anxiety levels by showing sort of like unsafe practices there too. Pride, and this is just going off of my own experience of this year specifically, Pride was a little bit more introspective. It was a little bit more thinking about what it is that I am proud about. Of course, Pride is very colourful and flamboyant and loud and all of that good stuff. And obviously, I was doing all that last year. But now, because everything was virtual, it was, how do I celebrate this while at home or while I'm in a pandemic, while I have to think about my safety a lot more and safety of others. And for me, it reminds me that I am privileged and that I came out at a young age. And people say that bravery and stupidity can be two very similar things, especially because I was so young when I did come out. So obviously I didn't understand the gravity of what it meant to be a gay boy when I did come out, but I was still safe. And that's not the case with a lot of people. That's not the case for a lot of adults now, currently. And we're talking over 10 years ago I came out. So I think it's always just like a nice little well, it's not nice, but a little, it's a big reminder of how privileged I am. And if it wasn't for me being out, then I wouldn't be helping others. I wouldn't be doing all the different types of jobs that I have going on to sort of improve the health and well-being of other queer people. Speech of Pride, I pray to the queer God that there will be a time when we can go out again and we can be just as playful and campy and glittery and flamboyant as we were before. I really do miss that. But again, I think moving forward, this is a reminder that we are privileged to do this. Like, there's an uproar, or there was an uproar of people not being able to go to their prides. I bought tickets for some of the prides across the UK, and it's a reminder that outside of the pandemic, there are people that could not go to Pride at all. And that was because of their own safety. We are literally at home now because there is a virus and we're thinking about our safety. But there were people before that who were not able to go out to either Pride or didn't even have a Pride wherever they came from because of their safety too. And I think that's something that we should all really, especially people who are out, be mindful of. For me, visibility is key. I always think that or I am conscious that now, because of things like social media and like different laws being abolished or changed and things like that, there's a lot more visibility among queer people. And I think that being visible is a political statement. And when you go to events like Pride and it is glittery and flamboyant and it can make lots of other people feel uncomfortable. And that, in my sense, is also really political, in the sense that, you know, we are here, we are queer, that sort of message that is being sent. Yes, there are queer people, but then when you're thinking about queer people of colour, they are then marginalised even further, to the point where now there is a Pride on a separate day, and it is growing tremendously. And that demonstrates again how important visibility is, because if it wasn't, there wouldn't be anyone showing up. It would, like, you know, Ladyfield wouldn't have to move Pride from was it Vauxhall down to like Hackney, East London, if there wasn't a need for it. And there is, and that just shows you again that visibility is key, and it is a political statement. Racism. I mean, it's not like discrimination. Racism is something that just cuts through in everything. And I think a lot of the time people see queer people and think, right, well, they're marginalized, so, you know, that's it. And no, racism still keeps going, like even through communities that are already marginalized, such as queer people of color. They're a group that is marginalized even further. And again, because of that, we have things like Black Pride. So part of my use of being privileged is to allow for spaces for other people to then go in and do. You know, not everybody, just because somebody's queer doesn't mean that they all then have to facilitate spaces for other queer people, and they may not have the capacity to do things like that, and all that kind of stuff. And I think my idea isn't to pull people out or to raise their own visibility, especially if they don't want to. But it's about having some sort of space or a platform or whatever it is, so that they can, if they want to, and also see other people do it too. But again, when thinking about Coming Out Day, which was recent as well, you know, the idea that not everybody can come out, and not everybody, it may not be beneficial for everybody to just come out as soon as they realize that their sexuality is not just like straight, that they should come out, because it may not be a safe thing too. So I think that's always one thing that, like, we're in a pandemic. If anything, safety is the most important thing at the moment. So it's not a case of you should be out and proud or you should be visible. There aren't any shoulds. We shouldn't be, we shouldn't be. Let's not should on each other, but allow for people to identify and take the time with whatever it is. Intersectionality is the idea that marginalized identities overlap or interact with each other, and it creates this space. So I think a lot of the time people assume that the more minority statuses they may have, what I call the oppression Olympics, which may be a really crass way of putting it, but it might be a case of someone saying, well, I've got these two things, and then someone else saying, well, okay, I've got these three things, so that means that I'm more oppressed. And of course, that is something to take into consideration. But at the same time, it's really important to understand that obviously everybody's experiences are valid and everyone's experiences are different. I'm Black, I'm gay. That doesn't necessarily mean that my experiences are exactly the same as someone else who is Black and gay in London. I'm 1,000% sure that my experiences would be completely different to a Black person in Jamaica who is also gay. And so, again, although there is intersectionality in the sense that we are both we're both Black, we're both gay, for example, there's always going to be nuances in the experiences that we are still having. And I mean, I love the concept of intersectionality as well, because it does add nuance to people too. And it gets people thinking a little bit more around what the challenges might be for somebody who is of a minority status as well. From an anthropological perspective, oh yes, I did anthropology as my undergrad, so I'm going to bring it back to that one. Community happens because of engagement and participation. And I think if anyone wants to be a part of a community and wants it to be meaningful, and they want things to happen, and they want to be heard, then there is a level of participation that is needed. And so I think that's where it can be quite challenging, because obviously we've spoken before about everyone being able to take their own time, everyone's in their own lane. Not everybody who is out has to be, doing workshops and like putting their face all over social media and things like that. But I think a contribution can just be something simply as just being present, being somebody who is part of a conversation. Again, you don't have to plaster your face, name, anything like that all over social media or whatever it is, because your safety is always going to be paramount. But I also think that that is one way of forming meaningful connections with a lot of people. And from the jobs that I've accumulated, I've made a lot more queer connections because it's something that doesn't fall into clubbing or dating. And we're talking about things that are important, we're passionate about, and we're all sort of having these sort of cathartic conversations as well. And and that's how I've sort of found my way into the community. I think we have a lot of amazing people online, queer people of color, the social media warriors, the activists. I think hope is now. I think there's so many people that are coming out now and telling their stories and creating spaces that I could only dream of creating for other people, and creating that level of visibility, which is something that that's one of my personal goals, to be able to reach some people, reach the level of some people as well. And I think that right now, when I think of hope, I think of people who are already quite active in the community, because they are doing stuff, they're working. So yeah. I think there's always going to be a need for cooperation and support from others, from allies, from different generations, things of that nature, always. For instance, when I was doing my master's and it focused on the intersectionality of Black gay men, there was there was a teeny tiny amount of information that I could use. A lot of the research was pulling things together and sort of making it sort of add and make sense. There aren't that many papers and information around the experiences or the disparities of queer people of color and how like being marginalized may help. And I know that I am now part of a generation where we are creating academic literature so that generations under me will then have that as their benchmark, and they'll go in, they'll probably find some crazy stuff that I've never even thought of before. I think we are growing, and we are obviously going in the right direction. I think things like social media has just sort of accelerated that a lot, because people are able to communicate a lot quicker as well. And yeah, I think we're doing good.